Mr. Iqbal Latif, Pakistan has
Thank
now
you.
successfully
Sure.
mediated
ठीक है.
between the US and Iran. Shed some light on the fact that what were the major obstacles in this agreement?
History is the major obstacle in this agreement. 47 years of history, recent history since 1979 Iranian Revolution. They have always said that America is the Saturn, and they were not going to discuss with them anything, and they are not going to talk to them. And not only that, they think that since overthrow of Mossadegh, they have serious issues. Iranian and Ayatollah Khomeini personally declared, and every Friday sermon in Iran, there used to be the clarion call of one thing, and that clarion call used to be a debt to America, Mark Baris America, and that is something that has been the cornerstone foreign policy objective of Iran. So basically, that is a bigger thought than I think I would say comparable to something like America-China thought that happened with Chu Enlai and Kissinger meeting each other in 1971, again with the help of Pakistan, again with the help of, and the doors were opened from, he was shown to be in Nathia Gully and he was in Peking, and Sultan Muhammad Khan drove him to the airport, the foreign secretary. That is the kind of things Pakistan is used to doing, something extraordinary always. So in 1971, the doors of China were open because Sultan Muhammad Khan and in the times of President Yahya Khan, they opened the doors of Henry Kissinger. And then in 1972, President Nixon met him in Mao Zedong and started that thought that resulted in today $20 trillion in Chinese economy connected to the world. That's something extraordinary. Similarly here, I see some green offshoots. I see that from these minutes, ice has been broken. They're talking to each other. They started talking to each other even about was events and all. And events has been talked to Foreign Marshal for now in last 2 3 months. And I tell you honestly, this is a very momentous occasion, at least that a war that was being planned and designed, that will be a continuous, perpetual destruction of the whole region in GCC and intra-Islamic war, that has been avoided. I tell you honestly, the design was much more bigger. The design was that at the end of the day, the regime has to be changed. Okay, regime could not be changed. The promises given to President Trump were that, okay, we will attack, and within 3 to 4 days, all of a sudden, the regime will fall and collapse once the Rahbar will go. And that did not happen. And it resulted into a resolve of and resilience of the Iranian people that no, we will not be allowed to be taken back on a to be dictated by a war. That that Iran, rather instead of disintegrating politically, became integrated, irrespective of the party lines. Even if you look at it, a lot of Iranians who were anti-present regime, they did not accept this whole idea of having to be bombed by somebody. And I have this famous written theory about nations. The nations of the world. In these nations of the world, I developed a thesis in which I said there are kind of nations and kind of nations. The nations which are oldest nations of the world and the entire cradle of civilization depends on those nations. And these are nations with a history of more than 1,000 years. And within those nations are Gaul, for example, where I'm sitting in Paris, Gaul, the French. There are Germanic tribes. There are Romans, for example, Italians, of course, and then Greeks are not to be forgotten, and then Mesopotamia. Of course, people living between Euphrates and Tigris. Of course, people of Hijaz. They are old nations. Of course, not as a nation, but as a land, but also Indus Valley civilization. But one of the oldest nation is Iran. You cannot deny it. And these nations have a caliber and character. They don't disintegrate. You will never hear about an old nation saying we'll be disintegrated. We had this problem in France, and Paris was occupied. and then after 4 years it was freed. Nations don't disappear. These old nations have a character. Germanic tribes, they were disintegrated under Bismarck. They got united. Germany is Germany. They got united again, albeit Soviets wanted it to be disintegrated and fragmented, and East and West Germany, but all it collapses into one thing because language, food, culture, poetry, literature, it all combines together and forms the kind of a nation. Iran is that kind of an old nation. It is nearly 5,000 years old history. And yesterday I was talking to somebody and I explained in my talks about how Universal Declaration of Human Rights is originated from rights of human beings by Darius. It is there in London. You can see in the museum, and it's a cylinder, and that's something that is very dear to them. Of course, Iranians still practice the old traditions of Nowruz, their old culture. Saadi and Shirazi is one of the most Ferdowsi. They are people of literature. They have extraordinary language. You cannot just bomb them out of existence and disintegrate them. If you will try that, and albeit I'm anti-regime, you know that. I've written about the regime for last 30 years of my life. Iranian.com, I have 150 articles. I wrote the article in 2006, Mahdiviyat, about the ultimate objective of the Iranian regime, that change will only come when chaos will increase. And I know that. But on the other hand, I'm not one of those crazy person not to deny the existence of an extraordinary nation that I'm proud of, and also that have connections through my wife. My wife is a Persian. That, with notwithstanding the fact, I have great amount of respect. So again, you asked me that, Iqbal, what happened? That has been avoided. You can't, Pakistanis or any nation in the world cannot appreciate, and historians like me will write this extraordinary moment. What has happened? It could have been a disaster if this war would have not stopped. If on after 40 days Pakistan did intervene, Asim Munir had this unique, extraordinary character and responsibility because he had the opening in June 2025, when the first attack after Sindoor happened, and there was supposed to be the bombing Tehran on 10th of June. Then Mr. Trump was then forced that, come on, start bombing. And he was in G7 meeting. He flew from Toronto onto his White House, and he said to the world that, oh, take care, that what is going to happen is going to be a disaster. And that disaster was, he told Tehran to leave the homes. But then there was a 2.5 hour lunch. And this 2.5 hour lunch, not much, not many times, except in the Second World War, chief of the army staffs and the field marshals or generals go and meet the president for 2.5 hours in the White House for a lunch on which the entire national security team was there. Asim Munir was asked to brief. And the reason Pakistan has just been in the room was one thing only: historical and geographical relevance of Pakistan cannot be denied. That's a problem. Pakistan sits on the confluence of Khyber Pass, Bolan Pass, Silk Road, GT Road, you name it. It's a civilization as old as 5,000 years old. Yes, Pakistan came into existence 78 years old. But what happens to be Pakistan guards the very roads and journeys through which Shumanites came in, through which Alexander the Great came in and crossover into Attack, and had this battle of with Porus or Hyder Pass. And that's the kind of history Pakistan portrays. And the name India comes from Indus Valley civilization. The Persians could not pronounce Seen, so Sindh was pronounced, Indus was pronounced as Hind, and Hindustan originated from that. But that's a great pride for the South Asians, all of us. And therefore, it's not about thing. If this organization and deep civilization has to be seen in context of what's happening in Iran and what's happening. If there would have been a war, and that war would have led to the destruction, like what we have seen post-Soviet invasion in 1979 in Afghanistan, that since 79 to 2026, as of today, we are seeing the turbulence and tumult within Kabul, within Kandahar, within Jalalabad, and we are still bombing the Taliban. Things have not settled. They have harbored Taliban in Pakistan, who have killed 150,000 people since 1979 to now. So we know what happens. So Asim Munir, in that lunch with President Trump, explained to him the region, explained to him the history of the region, 2.5 hours. He was very positively taken in. Before leaving G7, he had called upon Tehranis to leave their houses because there's going to be a tough day in Tehran because they were supposed to bomb a facility, a nuclear underground facility near Qum. When Qum is not very far, I have been to Qum and I've been to Tehran on my way, and I've seen it's what 67, 50 kilometers, and they were supposed to bomb that night, and the radioactivation activity resulting from that underground bombing, they were worried about it. But then on that day, Asim Munir, that was the first extension Asim Munir got. That was extension. There was a 3-day extension. Now, this I know, and from inside, I talked to people and all, and this 3-day extension was the reason that they did not bomb soon after that night. And he was totally impressed by the fact that history and geography and fragmentation of Afghanistan is a yardstick and a kind of a marker that we don't want to follow here. Again, with Iran, the same. That's what people don't understand. That's what Indian strategists fail to understand. They were never in the room. India was part of the non-aligned movement, always have been part of the non-aligned movement. They don't want to interfere with anything hot. They don't take it hot. And any hot war, they want to be out of it. In 1979, when the war started and Soviets invaded Kabul, they were with Berber Kamal. 500,000 Afghans were killed. And Indians said, no, we are neutral. But they had actively supported the Berber Kamal government with Soviets. And Pakistan was fighting then. But there was air battles with Russian pilots. In Russia, there was a vice president shot at Pakistani Air Force pilot. With all due respect, 3 to 4 registered hits have taken place of Indian Russian planes. There was an active battle going on with Russia. Stinger missiles were being fired. That was taking on the biggest empire, which maximum number of. It needs a strong nation to take it on. So it sits on the confluence of hardened roads, wars, violence. This is the DNA of this land. The DNA of lands cannot be changed, Zain. That's a problem. And then people who need to understand why Pakistan is in the room. Pakistan is in the room because Pakistan has actively pursued these things. Pakistan has pursued with China. Pakistan has pursued with the Afghans in 1979, whereas others were not pursuing this. Others were neutral. So as a result of that, was an opening that they were able to explain to the Americans, to President Trump, that don't get involved with this. Don't get. There was an effort since long that let's do it. Let's bomb Iran, finish their nuclear underground mountain radioactivity, uranium enrichment plants like we had, and then those plants were supposed to be eliminated. Yes, they have tried to do it, but they were as deep as 100 meters with uranium enrichment churners that they have been attacked once before with the viruses. They have been attacked now through the outlets in the mountains, and yes, they have been damaged. They're there, and that was a purpose, but it happened. That was delayed in June in 2025. So here we are saying that this was an extraordinary moment for Pakistan to convince United States of America after this war started. But this time, President Trump was convinced that no, they are about to make the bomb. And then the problem was that in itself, the Iranian negotiators in Oman told them that yes, we have 60% enriched uranium for 10 bombs. And that they say is the trigger point, and they started bombing because they didn't want them to have.